quick introduction. My name is Kyle Pertuis. I'm a PCC through the International Coach Federation. I'm also president-elect of the San Antonio chapter and enjoying being a board member and kind of learning as we go from the leadership of Carissa and my other fellow board members that have been on. So I have an executive leadership coaching practice. I live in New Braunfels, Texas, and work pretty much all over, really all over everywhere now with the virtual component being so alive and well. So one of my specialties is core energy leadership, and so I thought I'd share a little bit of that with you. My colleague, ChiChi, is also an expert in energy leadership, and I'll turn it over to her for a quick introduction.
I'll consider myself more a budding expert, not quite where you are. I'll get there. I'm ChiChi. I am the director of community programs, community development for ICF San Antonio. I work for CPS Energy in leadership development, and I'm looking forward to all the topics we're going to hear today on energy, how you guys are practicing energy and what you're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, so we want to keep these as interactive as possible. So we'll be probably bantering back and forth a bit. I also want to acknowledge Susanna, who, if you guys were fortunate enough to join the call last week, she was one of the co-hosts with Paula. But Susanna is here making sure all of our technical stays the way it's supposed to, and she too has a background in energy leadership, so we'll look to her input as well. And also perspectives from those on the outside that may not have this type of specialized training. But I think one of the things that's really important that I try to convey as a trainer and a facilitator and a coach is that understanding energy leadership doesn't have to be some long drawn out process of going through all of this special training. It's just really, from a conceptual basis, it's very, very fundamental. And now we can make it really complicated, but I think it's just really about understanding the work of Bruce Schneider, who laid out what we call the energetic self-perception chart years ago, probably pushing on 25 to 30 years ago. And what he did was basically break down energy into 7 different levels. And so we'll talk about the core thought, feeling, and emotion, as well as the action as a result of each of those levels. And I think just as we've tried to simplify that, even just within this short period of time, you guys will be able to come away with maybe some heightened sense of awareness around, number one, how are you showing up energetically? And then number two, where do you see some of these things showing up in other people? So hence the title today, Discover 7 Levels of Leadership That Create Your Work in Your Life. And in that always maybe ever evasive work-life balance that we talk about and wonder if it really does exist. So I'll move this into a fairly simple question that I'll let ChiChi kind of take the lead on, and we'll see where we are here.
So the question is, who wants more energy? As Carl just described, energy leadership is truly a process of leading energy so it works for you instead of against you. So here's an open discussion. Who wants more?
What do you think? Who
raise your hand or put in the chat?
Yeah, who wants more energy? What do you think?
Always up for more energy.
Yes.
Is that Carissa?
Yes.
Yes.
Always up for more energy? Other thoughts?
Susan said yes. Janet said absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess it would depend on what kind of energy it is, though.
Therein lies the point, right? We have, the energy is up to you. What energy you have is up to you. Carl, can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So to Carissa's point, there are 2 types of energy, right? according to what Bruce did about 20 years ago, he categorized energy into catabolic and anabolic. So catabolic energy are energies that are destructive, draining. It breaks you down. But here's the misnomer, right? Catabolic energy is actually boost you in terms of fear, or when you have to fight something, you need that catabolic energy to get going. But you can't dwell in it because of the destructive part of it. And if you see there, it releases bad hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. The adrenaline helps you in that time when you need to boost to run away or to fight. But if you dwell in it, it creates more problem. Conversely, anabolic energy is more constructive, right? It's building. It gives you, it expands, growth. It's healing. It brings more peace and calmness to you. And the hormones that is associated with anabolic energies are testosterone, endorphins, dopamine. These are things that help you relax, that fight off those bad hormones like cortisol, that builds your immunity even. So now to answer Carissa's question, which one do you want? It's up to you.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of point to make, because there are times when we may choose either, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that is often such a misnomer is that when we talk about energy, catabolic energy is associated with bad energy and anabolic is with good, and it's not really the case. Energy is energy, right? We may want more of one or the other, depending on what experience or what situation we're confronted with. ChiChi pointed out, in times that we feel threatened, right? When we think about fight or flight, and I think now the psychology is fight, flight, or freeze. So those are going to trigger those catabolic hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and they can be very beneficial. Those big muscles tighten up and we prepare to fight, or we prepare to run, or whatever it is. There are other times where that will literally break us down and compound itself as stress. On the other side, the anabolic energy is great, but I think it's also, from a human perspective, to think that we're going to go through life in this Pollyanna, everything is wonderful all the time kind of viewpoint may not always be realistic. Doesn't mean we won't strive for joy and happiness and creativity and clarity and, you know, absolute passion and unconditional love and all those things. However, as humans, we know that our range of emotion is going to touch both on catabolic and on anabolic energies. And so the opportunity really is building our awareness around where are we and what triggers that catabolic energy, so that we can make more conscious choices about, is it serving me or is it really draining me? ChiChi, as you were walking through this, it reminds me just kind of that example of, if I could ask everybody just for a second, think about somebody in your life that when you're around them, they absolutely drain the ever-living life out of you, right? It's the person that when the phone rings, you roll your eyes and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this today. So when you think about that person, and you don't have to point to them or say their name, when you think about that, what are the thoughts and feelings that run through your mind? Share those either in the chat or just speak them out. What kind of thoughts run through your mind when you think about that person?
It's draining to be around them.
It's draining, right? Yeah.
A lot of drama.
Drama. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's in many ways, it's like I don't even have the energy to listen to it. So we don't answer the phone. We move on to the next thing. Now, on the flip side of that, I would like for you to think about somebody that every time you're around them just pumps you up, feeds you full of that positivity and just the drive to want to talk with them and soak up more of the information that they have to share. And you just can really sit back down with them, even if it's been years since you've seen them, and just pick up where you left off. And when you think about that person, what are the thoughts and feelings that you would associate with that?
It's very life-giving. I mean, there's just this positive energy and synergy that happens.
Yeah. Other thoughts? And I'm not looking in the chat.
Uplifting and inspiring.
Yeah, inspiring. I love that, Gigi, because it is. And we have those kind of people, even if that's maybe unspoken, we take that on in a way that's like, wow, this is just, it's awesome. And we want to know more. And likely those are people that we learn from in many ways too, right? So it allows us to tap in even to that, into that creative side of things, to be open and explore and be innovative and really seek out and understand more of what it is to be around that energy. So I think the distinction that ChiChi shares is important to understand. Number one, that they are very different types of energy. Number two, that neither of them are necessarily good or bad. We just may prefer one over another depending on our circumstances. Anything you'd add to that, Susanna or ChiChi, since you guys both have kind of had some more detailed exposure to this?
I wanted to key in on what Teresa said about anabolic when she thought about the anabolic person, the life-giving.
Oh, yeah.
So you seek that person out. And I know my person, anytime I'm going through anything, I just want to talk to them, because even if I don't tell them what's going on, just from my voice, they could tell something is wrong and say something that feeds me, right? So recently I started thinking about that. So I decided to be that to the person that drains me. So it's an experiment I'm doing right now that is quite interesting. And it speaks to the awareness, I think, that Carl is going to talk about next. So let's hold on to that and think of flipping that coin on the person that drains you and become that life-giving person to them. So we'll touch on that later. Just ruminate on that for a minute.
Love it. Let's take a look at the 7 levels of energy, and we use the word leadership and attitude interchangeably a lot of times when we're talking about these things, because I think it's very relevant to understand how it can show up. So the first level of energy really is defined by characteristics of maybe feeling lost. Maybe it's that I feel stuck. Very much a mindset around I have to, as opposed to coming from a place of choice. A lot of fear in level 1. So with that type of thinking, that what we would associate with maybe victim thinking of helplessness and hopelessness, it's pretty, I think, understandable to think that the action that would come of that would be not much, right? So somewhat lethargic at best when we're feeling level 1. So I'm curious, and I'm going to throw this out as we kind of progress through each of the 7 levels, as to where maybe any of you have experienced some level 1 energy as we've been dealing with this craziness with the COVID-19. Where maybe specifically are you guys willing to identify with that? What do you think?
I think that when you listen to the news or watch the news, especially when you watch the news, not so much read or listen, um, the impact or the way all this negative information affects you makes you default to that level one, right? Where you're looking at all these numbers and it's scary and what the purpose of news is to create that adrenaline rush, right? So that's why you default here and you see everything as, you know, black. Everything is awful. Everything's terrible.
Yeah, thanks for that, Susan. I think, you know, obviously it's individual perspectives that look at it, but when you certainly, I think the news is a great way to kind of represent it because that sucks us in, but it makes us feel trapped. I think that's the feeling. I was even feeling that some yesterday. Just kind of we've had painters working on our back deck, and of course with all the rain in the San Antonio area, it's delayed some things, and so they have plastic hanging all over my living room window that looks out into my backyard, and that's like my escape, right? I can see trees and grass and all of those things, and just kind of drawing the correlation of, man, this feeling enclosed and kind of trapped in one space and feeling stuck really exemplifies how I think a lot of people have felt, you know, lockdown. We're using terms like lockdown. We're using those terms that make us feel like I posted today, like we're driving with the brakes on, you know? So anywhere we experience that lack of choice or feel like we're having to do things is what we would call that level one energy.
We have a comment from
Yeah, go ahead.
and she says, feeling stuck since there are no answers of how things are going to be. You don't want to make a decision to find out. It no longer is the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that too speaks to that avoidance, right? And in level one, or the inaction that comes with that. So yeah, there are no answers. You know, we've really never experienced anything like this in our lifetime, and so we're and somewhat, I guess, if we think about cause and effect, we're somewhat at the effect of other people's decisions and expertise to offer guidance to those of us that may not have that type of expertise. And so that brings up, I think, just a massive amount of emotion for us. And some of which, actually, I'm going to move into level two, and we'll see how these things can build on each other. When we look at level two, which is also predominantly catabolic energy, we see the shift away from the victimization more into anger. And there's maybe a level of combativeness and resistance or fighting. And that makes sense because we think about fight or flight. Those are going to come from that catabolic energy that ChiChi described earlier. And so when you think about anger, the thought process behind that, and the frustration that comes with it, that action is typically going to be somewhat defiant. So, you know, I think you're using this kind of same environment that we're experiencing. When we experience that level one of feeling as if we don't have a choice or we feel stuck, for many people, that triggers anger because that's how we react, right? It's like, well, you can't make me do this. And so then we may lash out, or we may take action or take things into our own hands, or we may fight against what is being tried to be imposed on us. And so I think we've seen some of that resistance as people want things opened up faster than maybe what the experts are saying. But I think really anywhere in our lives where we feel that level of frustration or anger or stress starting to compound for any variety of reasons, it's important to recognize that, because it is suppressed in that catabolic energy, which limits the options that we see, right? And when you think about being under stress, we feel all closed in and maybe feel pain in our neck or our back or our stomach, and we feel tightened up. And so it's challenging to really open up and say, oh, well, let me consider what options I may have, when right now all I'm focused on is me winning. And I want to make sure that I get through this and whatever the situation is. So again, I'll open that up to you guys. What do you think from a level 2 perspective you've experienced, whether it's directly related to COVID or maybe it's something in your business or in your home life? I know a lot of people that I have spoken with that travel quite a bit for work. Now they're home, and that's great in many ways, but it also is a relearning of how to interact with spouses and family members that may not be the norm under certain circumstances. So I'll open that up to you guys. What are your thoughts there? Level 2.
Well, I'll share that I try to go and visit with my elderly parents once a year in Brazil. And so I had my ticket already, and I resisted canceling until they canceled on me. So that was, I think, an example of this. In some ways, I was just, because there's so much about this we don't know. I didn't know if it was going to open up, right? And I think I just held back and waited and resisted until I could, I couldn't do anything about that anymore. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a good example, but that is what it comes to mind.
Yeah, well, Gigi, I think it is. I think it may represent maybe more of some of the level 1 of the unknown, right? And that fear that was causing you to not take action. But likely there was some anger and frustration in that too, because you wanted to go see them, right? So you felt like you were being held back and you wanted to fight that, but you're like, what do I do? And then fortunately, it sounds like they did it for you. So you're off the hook on that end, but it's interesting because our energy is so much like the stock market that in a matter of seconds, you're probably experiencing, one or both of these, if not all 7. And that'll make even more sense as we open those up. But certainly a good example of experiencing that level 1 and probably some 2 as well.
I was going to highlight that there is no time. It's not that you feel 1 and then the 2. Right. You can actually feel them simultaneously within seconds of each other. So I think that was a good example of feeling that helplessness because you can't control it. And then the anger that they made the decision and took your power of choice away by canceling.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts around level 2?
Related to COVID, I'm thinking of people who make panic purchases or who buy guns, at this time when it's the last thing we need. Or people being rude.
Yeah.
One that I experienced on Mother's Day, I went to pick up food from IHOP, and I'm sitting in the car curbside, and you see all these people not wearing masks. You see a guy standing at the door, rubbing his nose and touch the door, and I'm like, oh no! I almost got out of my car and said, stop it. But then I realized I'm in my car, he's in his face. So I had to shift myself real quick before I reacted. But I did feel a little bit of anger in that moment, that in this time, you're touching all over your face and touching door that everybody else is touching, and you're not wearing a mask.
Yeah, no question. Sunalyn in the chat just posted catabolic energy seems to come from fear. Absolutely. It's definitely swarms in that catabolic energy, and we know what fear can do to how it can hold us back and how it can cause us to be reactive as opposed to being more conscious. And Sunalyn, I think you walked away right as I was commenting on your post in the chat, but absolutely, and it is. And even the example ChiChi just gave is her level 2 energy about that that gentleman, you know, touching his nose and then touching the door triggered fear in her, right? And so the judgment we see in catabolic energy becomes very, very heightened, both judgment of ourselves as well as judgment of other people, which is also often triggered by fear and anger and that feeling of resentment and being stuck. So let's jump ahead because I want to touch briefly on all of these, and I want to move into the anabolic levels. So starting with level 3, this is really where we see from a measurement perspective, it shifts more into anabolic energy. So there are more positive emotions, and a lot of times we'll talk about catabolic and anabolic energy as above the line or below the line. So when you think about in the context of leadership or how you lead yourself, below the line would be leading from that catabolic perspective. Poor me, I never get what I want, the world's out to get me. Or maybe a level 2, do it the way I said so because I'm right, I'm always right, that's why I'm in charge. And so those may be characteristics. Level 3 really moves us more into, I think, rationalization, dealing with things, and I think a lot of us have experienced that lately, right? So initially when things started changing so fast, we were maybe experiencing 1 or 2, and now we're like, well, you know, I'm okay. Maybe I'm doing things to stay healthy. I've got plenty of food. I've got toilet paper. So maybe the experts will come up with a solution sooner or later. So we rationalize, right? So there's a way to balance it. The challenge with level 3 is there's a tendency to settle for just good enough, right? So we really don't open our mind to tapping into the potential that we can have and really accelerate into. So level 3 is an interesting level because often we find we're either wanting more of it to move us out of that level 1 and 2, or we want less of it because it's holding us back from even higher, more productive and powerful levels of energy. So level 4 then, and I think Susanna and Paula last week on the Coach Connect talked a lot about selffulness. And so level 4, interestingly enough, is about care and compassion. The theme here really is about serving others, but within that construct is also that self-care, because what we know is if we don't take care of ourselves, there's no way we can show up as fully and authentically as we want to serve others. So when we think about level 4 from the perspective of this uncertain time, it's a lot of the outreach that we see. You know, how are we helping at the food bank? How are we doing things to check on our elderly parents, whether we can be there with them or not? So that compassion and the service to others and checking on neighbors and all of those kind of things become elevated when we can tap into that level 4, and our awareness really becomes about how do we reach out and how do we serve other people. Level 5 really is one of reconciliation. This is probably where we find some of the best leaders because they're looking for that collaborative solutions focused approach. It's very much a win-win. So when we engage at level 5 energy, we are very much about working as a team and creating win-win opportunities. A lot of entrepreneurs carry a lot of level 5 energy. It's an interesting level as well because there's often a tendency to fall into that paralysis by analysis, right? So opportunity is very much alive at level 5. So we see things all over and we want to jump in, and that often can give an indication that we don't pay attention to the risk associated, or we're not calculating everything and really looking at it because we see the opportunity. So we move from opportunity to opportunity as opposed to really maybe doing a deeper dive, or that can often hold us back. Moving to level 6. Level 6 is really where we tap into that creative genius and that intuition. When you think about moments of spontaneous genius and visionaries like Steve Jobs, even Bill Gates, so many of the brilliant pioneers in leadership have that ability to just tap into those things and create something from nothing. And so while we all have this potential some of you may be much more inclined to tapping into your intuition and, more importantly, trusting it than others. And that's a muscle and a skill that can be developed, is really starting to listen to that intuition. How does it show up for you? Is it audible? Does it come to you in visions? Is it just, you know, kind of the knowing you know without knowing how you know kind of approach? So intuition and creativity are very much alive at level 6. And this is something, again, I think so important when we have these types of things going on in our world, or, you know, since we've really never experienced it, how are we making time for ourselves to tap into that? And so really looking for those creative outlets. And you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I'm learning to cook, or I'm playing the guitar. That's great. It may be as simple as journaling, right? And writing and doing anything that allows you to tap into those higher levels of energy. And then finally, level 7, which is really the pinnacle on the highest, almost 100% anabolic level of energy. Absolute passion, non-judgment, unconditional love. These are all things that are inherent in all of us, and we all experience them. It's one of those things that we may not always be aware when we're experiencing it, because we're creating, observing, and experiencing all at the same time. So it's something maybe to strive for. None of our research shows that anyone sustains level 7 on a long-term basis, but certainly we all have that potential. The other thing is I want to point out with these is very much the fact that it's not about a progression, right? It's not about, well, if I'm at level 3, I got to figure out how to get to 7. It's the awareness of where am I, right? And so if I'm experiencing level 3 energy, would it actually help me to dip into some level 2 so that at least I'm taking action and I'm moving something forward? Or am I rationalizing because maybe I'm having some fear come up, which is dropping me down, and I'd like to let go of some of that so I can tap into more of that level 5. So again, like the stock market, over the last 20 minutes, you guys have all had thoughts, feelings, and taken some action as it relates to what we're talking about. And these things move around so quickly in our minds, the energy is just constantly flowing. So the more aware we are of what we're experiencing, the more we can begin to take action. So ChiChi, I'll turn this piece over to you briefly, as we may start to wind down here in the next 8 to 10 minutes. You want to talk on awareness.
So the key thing that Carl just talked about, the last thing he said, is about awareness, right? He just introduced us to the 7 levels. Awareness will take you from where you are to where you want to be. Here's an example. When I did my energy level test, I tend to resonate around 4, which is taking care. And I feel like it's because I have young children. So taking care of them becomes more important. What do they need? What did I need? But I realized also I quickly dive into 2. And the more I thought about it, I think it was choice. It's by choice. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. When your kid runs out into the traffic, you have no choice but to dip into anger and yell, stop, right? So awareness is knowing the levels, knowing your thought process, what is going through your mind right now? What am I feeling? And then what action can I take? Should I stay where I am? What do I need to do to get to the next level? Before I open it up to discussion, here's another one. Recently, I had to travel. And in the middle of having to travel, I paid for my ticket. The president announced that no flights from Europe is allowed. And I'm going to Africa. Africa announced that they're closing borders to all flights from Europe. And I had to travel. It was not a choice. So what do you do? In the moment, I was annoyed. I felt helpless. But I'm like, okay, I can stay here, but I still need to go. I quickly had to shift myself to find out, okay, what are my options? The options are what flights go from America to Africa without touching Europe. And I quickly took that action that allowed me to make my trip. So can you guys share some, knowing the 7 levels now, can you share where you've taken your thoughts and feelings and shifted your action based on what you need to do?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
All right, and this is Janet. I might have missed this a bit, ChiChi, but we're talking about energy levels.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about awareness. So are you saying we process we go from thoughts through to feelings, then move on to action, that it's kind of a process? Or are we thinking of our energy levels in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our actions?
We're thinking more energy is what it is, right?
Okay.
You can't destroy it, you can't change, you can't shift it from one to the other. It's awareness that helps you shift it.
Okay.
And what I mean is shift is this energy serving me right now? Or is it working against me? So what you're seeing here is understanding your thoughts, acknowledging your feelings will help you move to the energy that is serving you in the moment.
Yeah, and if I can add on that, Janet, if we really boil it down to saying our thoughts are energy, then each of those energy levels has a core thought, maybe a core emotion, and a core action that would come with that level of energy.
Okay.
Right? And so because there is a vast range within each energy level, right? So let's just say at energy level 1, let's say you responded with some fear that you experienced in a way that was like, oh, this is kind of scary. But let's say when you and I both got the same type of news about this at the exact same time, yours was, oh, this is kind of scary. Mine was utter helplessness. I was just like, oh my gosh, the world's going to be over. So we were both experiencing level 1 energy. It's just on a very broad range. Your actions still may have been associated with level 1 energy in that moment, but they may not have been as drastic as mine, right? Whereas I'm going into my tornado shelter and hoping I have enough canned goods to last for the next 3 months. You may have run out to the store and bought a few items you needed for a week. So the thought, feeling, and action is associated with the level of energy. I think what ChiChi was saying from an awareness standpoint is it's identifying, what am I thinking right now? When someone comes at us and they are angry and it triggers us, it pushes a button, and we have a tendency to react or to lash back out or to be angry at them because energy attracts like energy. And that's not how we want to show up, but for whatever reason, that person irritates us. When we can raise our awareness around what those triggers are, is we can catch ourselves in that thinking. And when I can capture the thinking and understand that energy level and know what feelings and response are associated with that or are normal for me, I can make different choices about how will I choose to respond. One of the things that I like to share when it comes to awareness is kind of 3 different perspectives, right? So let's take, for example, something happens to me, and like I just shared, somebody comes at me and they're angry, and I lash back out and I yell, my son didn't want to clean up his room. I was like, go clean that room up, and I yell at him. 20 minutes later, I'm having something to drink on the couch, and I realize, gosh, what just happened? What was I thinking? So I have awareness around the fact that something happened, at least. A lot of people don't even have that. A lot of people just move on. That's just life. That's how I roll. So when I realize that, at least I have some awareness around, what can I do differently next time if I choose to? The next kind of, it's not necessarily a step, but the second kind of perspective on awareness is my son does something, and as I am taking action towards him. Like, I told you to clean up your room. While I am taking that action, I'm actually thinking about, is this how you want to respond to your child? So I have more immediate awareness in the moment. I'm capturing my thoughts, I'm capturing my feelings and my actions, which would give me the opportunity to change it if I chose to right then. And then the third perspective is where we really are coming from a higher level of awareness. My son does something, I let that gap occur between stimulus and response, as Viktor Frankl speaks about. So it happens, I give myself the time to breathe and to think. This happened, how will I choose to respond to it in order to drive the outcome that I want to have? That puts me much more at cause and much more in control of a potential outcome, at least on my end. My son may not like it, but I can then communicate directly and maybe even more anabolically so that I don't carry guilt or wish I'd done something different in the future. And so it's that kind of constant training and constant awareness that allows us to show up differently in different situations. It also gives us the opportunity to choose catabolic energy if it serves us. It's just intentional, which is the difference. I hope that helps. As you can see, I will ramble on and on about
this. But that really did help. Thank y'all.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
So let me
here's a good place to come back to the question I asked earlier.
Yeah.
I said, okay, the shifting, I have a colleague that drains the life source out of me, literally. So I decided I can't avoid dealing with this person, and we can't talking about how you want to show up. I wanted to show up differently, and I wanted to have a consistent show up depending on, irregardless of who I'm discussing with. So I decided to use between the second and third options. Carl just talked about awareness, shifting in the moment, or deciding to show up in a certain way by giving that gap. So I decided that I'm going to try to give what I get from the person that feeds me to this person. So this person reports to me, so I had to do their review. So it was interesting. So I had to sit down and look at every word and decide in myself, no matter what she says, I'm not going to trigger, I'm going to try to understand it from her point of view. So the review that I dreaded the most, because I had an intentional thought and I was completely aware of my emotions, turned out to be the best review I gave this year. So think about that. And I'm going to let, to the end, so we cover everything, to share experiences you've had when that happened to you, when you were intentional and you got the result you intended, just by being intentional, which is what awareness is about.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm telling you, go.
Yeah, I was just going to say intention is really what it comes down to have the awareness around that in order to take the action and drive the outcomes that we want. So the next thing we just wanted to kind of touch on, and these are not necessarily matter of fact, but just as we think about steps to shift our own energy, even in that great example that ChiChi just gave us, is number one, we've got to be present in the moment. We've got to be willing to be open to that higher level of consciousness, and take into consideration what are some of the influencers, what's going on around me, and then having the presence of mind to center ourselves. And this doesn't mean we necessarily need to turn on a guided meditation just as we engage in a difficult conversation, but that deep breath, or the anchoring of your feet on the floor, or whatever it is for you to just check in with yourself and evaluate your current reality. Right now, what's going on? What is my current situation? How am I showing up in this situation? And how will I choose to respond in this situation for that step forward? So when we can give ourselves that space to really tap into those higher levels of energy and not be consumed by what catabolic thinking can do for us, it allows us to make that choice more consciously and more intentionally, even if that choice is a catabolic response.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference if we choose, if you know, my heaven forbid my wife were to come home and say, hey, we're not going to stay married, I might choose to sit on the couch and experience some level 1 energy and that victim energy. I don't understand. I can't believe this happened. Poor me. My awareness around that will determine how long I stay in that or when I choose to experience it. And so that's a drastic example. But being able to really kind of take in what's going on in that moment, and the more we practice this, the more we can do it in different types of settings, the more intentional our actions can become based on what we're thinking. And I think that's at least kind of that snap the fingers kind of, okay, what can I do the next time I feel like something's triggered me, or I feel angry or upset or a button's pushed, we talk about a lot. How can I make myself more present, anchor myself in the moment, center, really take a look at what's happening, what interpretation maybe am I making about it, and then what choice will I make in response to this? And see how that helps you maybe shift from some of those catabolic reactions to more anabolic responses. Anything you'd add to that? Anybody?
Carl, the only thing I'll add to that is like that, like example you just gave, there are times that your body is fed by wallowing, right? The victim, somebody takes care of you.
Yeah.
When you feel like a victim, and you need that sometimes. But the key thing is, how long do you stay in it? Do you stay in it to get what you need and then move on, or do you extend your time there?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I see Carissa just posted the 100 free coaching sessions to our community. And so kind of building on the energy, that's absolutely some level 4, right? Service to others and wanting to support in that way. And you know, if you guys aren't involved in that, we'd love to see you involved in that. Let me just kind of pose this challenge and think about what action you can take as a result of spending some time with us today to help you raise your awareness around the energy. Or we say a lot, how are you showing up, right? If you know those areas in your life where you may show up with anger, or you've kind of got the story already made up in your mind before you even go in to have the conversation, where can you step back and think about ways to tap into some of those higher energies that may serve you in a better way? For some people, tapping into that level 2 serves them, right? We don't stick up for ourselves. And it doesn't have to come across as aggressive or combative to stick up for ourselves. And so that's an example of where that level 2 energy can often serve us. Speak up, share what your thoughts bring to the table. Really, really important. So think about what action you'll take as a result of today. And then most importantly, and to piggyback on ChiChi's example, be the energy you want to attract, because it's going to happen one way or the other. Yep. So, if you want to experience love, be love. If we want to experience joy, we need to be joy. And having awareness around that can be really, really helpful as we interact with loved ones and with those that we don't know well, and really anywhere that we're showing up as leaders. So let's kind of open it up to anybody that wants to stick around for the next 10 minutes or so for questions. And we appreciate you guys taking a chunk out of your day to join us, and know that this was a very quick and short explanation of a very broad subject. And ChiChi and I were talking a little earlier. I'd love to offer our Energy Leadership Index assessment to any of you guys that have never experienced it. So if you're interested, then just connect with me or ChiChi, and I'll make sure that gets to your inbox. And then we'll even give you a choice as to whether you want ChiChi or I to do the debrief, and we'll offer that up for about an hour of our time to walk you through that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what that assessment can say about you and your energy. So please take advantage of that, and I will be happy to make those available. So with that, ChiChi, any final words?
Yeah, one thing that has been helping me since the introduction of to energy is that whole suspension of judgment.
Yeah.
You know, Cy Wakeman talks about the story that plays in our head. If we can suspend that story, it will allow us to hear in the moment. That first step to shifting is being present. If you can learn to suspend that judgment or the voice or the stories that we've made up, we free ourselves to all the possibilities that are around. So if we can start there, I think we will see progress as we stay aware and more intentional about what we do or think.
Yeah, love it. Good stuff.
I just wanted to share a couple of things. One, I too am a certified practitioner of Energy Leadership Index, so if, I'll be glad to help. The second thing is, you know, we talked about intuition and accessing our intuition when we're at that level 6. And sometimes it's hard to define what intuition is, right? That gut feeling, something inside you that tells you without really knowing. And one day I was reading something about intuition that really stood out for me. And it said that intuition is really the combination or the sum of all of your life experiences, your failures, your successes, your lessons learned, the things that you taught and learned, the teachings of other people that are around you in your life, books that you've read, courses that you've taken. And so all of that adds up to your intuition. And that's how sometimes we make decisions, but it's not just, you know, something that is, I can't find the right words. It is founded on things that you know, that you experience, that you've experienced. And I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
It helps ground it, but there's that spirituality. And Carl, I had this conversation with you when we went through Eli. I had a problem with spirituality because spirituality to me, the way people talked about it seemed to be against Christianity, but it isn't. The truth of it is spirit speak to spirit. And intuition, people that are very intuitive can tune in to that spirit speaking to them, pick up on things that there is a knowing in the universe that we're not tuned into it. Doesn't make it any less real. So to practice intuition and to get comfortable with it is if you get a sense, try it out. Don't excuse it.
Yeah.
Follow it. Go with the trend. See where it goes. And that's the difference between people that are intuitive. They've honed it, they've trained it, they believe it.
Yeah.
And then you can tap into it.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, so Susanna, I wasn't trying to exclude you, but Susanna too is an energy leadership coach. So any of the three of us would be happy to walk you through your debrief. You can take your pick. If you're interested in doing that assessment. I saw Lisa had to jump off. She's interested, so we'll sync up with her. If you guys just want to let me know who, I will be happy to provide the assessment, and then you guys can select whoever you'd like to do the debrief, and we'd be happy to offer that to you.
I'm interested too.
Great.
I do have an example that happened just recently that I can kind of see it fits into what you're talking about. But I work with women who have suffered betrayal in their marriage. So it's very likely they're in a very angry places, right? So one of the in one of the groups recently, we had technical problems in the meeting with Zoom, and this person connected with me in a very distressful way and very disappointed, and and that brought that energy of just feeling defeated and feeling like, wow, this is terrible. I want to be here for these people to help them, and this is what the impact it's having. So I kind of got spiraled a little bit with my thoughts until I just wait a minute. Remember who I work with, and that they are in a very tough place. And it took me, so one of the things that helped me is just, I don't need to respond right away. I can take care of myself and help myself center myself and think about it. I use prayer for that, right? And that helped a lot in my response the next day, when I was able to do an email that was very gracious and kind and kind of looking things from her perspective. That one more thing was taken away from her, by things not working properly, and giving her credit for that. And somehow, yeah, that all helped. Kind of, ChiChi, what you were saying, that review that was, you saw some, that could have gone so wrong, it wound up working so well, right? So I saw that happening too with this case. So I just, I'm grateful, and I just hear what you're saying, and it reminded me of this recently.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Gigi. Absolutely.
Thank you. It also goes to tell us that we create the future or the presence or whatever it is that we want. We have the power, not the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Other thoughts before we wrap up?
This has been so powerful, just to bring that awareness that is so key. I mean, it's what we help our clients gain through the coaching process, but I love being able to come back to it as a coach and just being aware of where is my focus and energy going, because that's really what gives the power to change what we want the experience to be. And all in a perspective of not judging what the energy is, but just to be curious and compassionate in that of, okay, this is what I'm experiencing now. What's going to be the most beneficial in my current situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Susanna, could I get you to put either your email or one of ours in there for anybody that wants to email us about the Energy Leadership Index assessment? That way you guys can reach out to us. We can get that set up for you. And as we come to the top of the hour, we will say thank you. And I feel like I should know what next week's topic is, so I can promote it, but I don't. Carissa or Susanna, do you guys know what we're talking about next week?
Yeah, it has to do specifically with self-care in the context of organizations. We've done a lot that's focused more on the individual or us as coaches, but how can we bring these concepts to an organizational context? And Aurora, I believe Aurora Geis is going to be facilitating that, and we might have a special guest as well.
Awesome.
All right.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.